Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I see we still have some people joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ali DeYoung. I'm the project manager with the Youth Employment Solutions Center, and we're really excited to bring this webinar to you today. I just wanted to share some quick housekeeping information. So before we get started, we will have ASL interpretation available. We're still waiting for them to log on, so they should be here in just a few minutes. And captioning services will also be available using the chat or the link that'll be placed in the chat box. And all of the presentation materials from today's presentation will be available on our website. Just under the webinar tab, there's the link. And then the recording will also be on the website as well. So I wanted to share briefly about the YES Center. So just a quick introduction, but we're the National Training and Technical Assistance Center to the Partnerships and Employment State Projects. So we work with a handful of states that have received federal funding to do systems change to improve youth employment within their state. And to learn more about our projects and the support that we have available, please visit our website. It's yes2employment.org. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Serena Lowe. She is our interim director with TASH and the senior advisor on the YES Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As Ali said, my name is Serena Lowe, and I'm the interim executive director at TASH and a senior advisor to the YES Center. And it is our wonderful pleasure today to kick off a three-part series on communications, technology, and inclusion, with a particular emphasis on employment. And with us today, we have an incredible national thought leader in this work, Jennifer White. Jennifer has been in the field of rehabilitation her entire career, starting her first paid job with the ARC of Bucks County in Pennsylvania. After a career as a special education teacher, she later opened Able Opportunities, which is a national consulting and local VR company, vocational rehabilitation company. She works with a broad range of folks, specializing in vocational, education, and communication goals and programs for both children, youth, and adults. She has worked as a researcher at the University of Washington to develop a number of accommodation strategies and tools to increase integration for those with the most significant impact of disabilities in our community. She's worked with a number of different states on their employment first systems change efforts to make sure that communication technologies and communication access are a key priority and tool for helping individuals enter the generic workforce and the economic mainstream. In 2014, she launched the Work Autonomy app, which I'm sure she's going to tell you about today. It's a person-centered accommodation tool that hundreds of people working in our economy today with disabilities are using in their everyday lives and in their employment situation. She's been a TA consultant, technical assistance consultant, and subject matter expert for the National Employment First State Leadership Program, where she worked with state teams, schools, employers, families, counties, providers, and agencies on employer engagement, customized engagement, innovative technology tools, and collaborative design that led to increased paid employment opportunities. I was on that project with Jennifer. I have seen what she is capable of, and I've also learned from her that technology and communication access is definitely the portal to full inclusion in this community. So on that note, thank you, Jennifer, for being here today and for kicking off our three-part series.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to know Serena, and I've learned as much from her, so I'm really glad to be here today. This is my big reveal with the hair that you saw in the picture to my COVID hairdo now. Thank you again for the introduction. I'm going to launch right into this, and I want to let you know that I'm going to start with some philosophy and lens, talking about how I think about this. Like Serena said, I've been doing this for my whole life, since I've been a Right Livelihood since I was 13 years old, volunteering in developmental centers. And I'm a permanent student in the School of Hard Knocks, continue to run into the why things aren't changing as fast as I want them to, my own self included in that story. So we're going to look at the lens of that and then move into the materials. I know you came to look at actual tools, and we're definitely going to get there, but I like to start here. And I'm going to say now that at some point in this first portion, I'm going to see if there are two people who would be willing to volunteer. And what I'm going to ask you to volunteer for is to demonstrate an exercise that I do with people when we're in person. It doesn't really carry the same weight when I'm just telling you about it. So if there are two people who are feeling brave today and they'd be willing to get on screen, I'm going to have you do a non-linguistic exercise with each other. So you're not going to be able to talk, and you're going to try to describe something to your partner. If you could flag that now so Serena knows who you are, and when it's time, we can promote you to so that we can get you on screen with us. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to launch. Oops. All righty. Okay. So I start with this very odd place of, right, look at us as human beings. How do we get to our belief systems? Like the world is flat. No, it's not. To, don't know if you know these old Greek astronomers, but Ptolemy was forever touted as the genius, knowing that the Earth is the center of the universe. And then Copernicus came along and said, no, I think I'm seeing the sun in the center of things, and we're revolving around it. Of course, he got kicked out of his professional and social communities for saying as much back then. But the idea is, when, you know, the checks and balances for me is how do we gain perspectives from our beliefs so that we can move on and grow as we gain skill on something. We look at kind of the time of enlightenment for us as human beings, where it was the first time where we moved beyond ourselves as the cause of everything. So that anthropomorphism of everything in my world, that biocentrism, that I'm causing everything. Oh, the lightning struck the ground. It's not because I was rude to my neighbor. It's because there's weather, and it doesn't have to do with me causing it. And the reason that I start with this perspective is because the projection of subjective properties onto nature is the basis of myth. And I think that's what we do when we're developing tools for people who process different than we do. We start with how we are organizing ourselves and the tools that we use, and we project those properties onto the other. And that's problematic for, you know, many reasons, and you all know most of them, and we're going to get into some of the whys and how to dismantle them. So you think that maybe that was just the old days, the world is flat, but we're talking about current day. This is just in the last 12 years. You know, it says a decade ago, but the slides are older. It's the first time the sequence of the human genome was fully assembled. And the group of scientists who worked on this could identify that there was 3% of the entire genome that included information to encode for proteins. Now, that was what we understood. We didn't understand the other 97%, and they actually gave it the name junk DNA. They gave it the scientific name junk DNA. Because we don't understand it, we stopped looking at it, we moved toward. So they did change the name, they got a lot of flack for it, and they changed the name, but this seems to be just more our habit as people, not something that we used to do as humans, but this seems to be part of human nature. So we know a lot, we know a little about what we're talking about in this field, you know, as we're the other brain that doesn't operate the same that mind does. I mean, we've come so far, it's phenomenal. And there's so many things that we don't know so much about. I love that saying, we know so much, we know so little, but that helps me pay attention. The older I get, it's true, the less I know, and that's a good thing. I got involved in deaf blindness decades ago, very fortunately. And it taught me more about autism than anything else that I've ever done. When I was immersed in classes, I was doing it for my own enjoyment. I was learning how to sign in an area where the deafblind community is huge. I was interacting with deafblind people. The more I was learning language and strong communication skills. So it's getting very clear at being a succinct, tactile communicator, taking in visual and auditory information, getting it very clear, offering it very clearly, being influenced by all those beautiful deafblind people here in the Seattle deafblind community. And what was happening, I was teaching a class at the same time in my day job. And at the time they had labels like ED and BD, but now we know most of the kids were probably on the spectrum. We just didn't have that diagnosis as a pendulum yet. As a range, sorry, spectrum. That's the word I'm looking for, the spectrum. And so as I was hanging out with deafblind people and getting better at my communication, all the students were getting better. And I didn't know at first, of course, what that connection was about, but I spent the next 10 years looking at why. And it really has given me, I bow so deeply to the deafblind community because it's helped me understand so many things. One, how to be a better communicator, but two, what happens when the right accommodation comes into play, how it changes everything that we see and everything that we assumed about someone. And then that also has taught me that curiosity is more important than conviction. One of my favorite teachers says that. I'm more interested in staying curious than having the answer. So Dr. Julian Chisholm was the doctor of Helen Keller. And he said to Annie Sullivan, her teacher, if a house collapsed in on a child, all of us would come with running with pitchforks and shovels. No one would stop digging until the child was found. And that's our task here, to keep digging until we find the child. He was talking about Helen Keller. We need to find her under this rubble of lack of access. I think that that quote summarizes what we do for a living. And when we start to really understand the rubble that we're talking about, you will never put your shovel or pitchfork down again. I mean, I know that people here are committed, and that's what we do, is continue to dig and dig. Now we're going to talk about digging, unearthing some of our own habits that are in the way. So I like this view of having the pitchfork and shovel. And when I work with teams, we all dedicate ourselves to the pitchfork brigade. I early on, of course, in Seattle, in a really diverse community of people, and in the deaf-blind community, which is small and diverse, started really looking at intersectionality and the social justice lens. It wasn't until I ran into this book that I could really give language to it. And this book also helped me integrate into the field that I'm working in why this is so important. We look at people with disabilities as a population of people that need support, and we want to, work together to how I describe myself when I'm sitting next to Aunt Juanita, who wants to know what I'm doing. Here we are at Thanksgiving dinner, and she's asking me, so what do you do for a living? This is how I summarize it. My job is to level the playing field for people with disabilities to have the same rights and access that I have. That's my job. For years, I've been working around the country teaching these trainings and workshops, and I ask the audience that question. I start out with, how many social justice workers are in the room? And until 2 years ago, I had maybe 1 or 2 hands per 100 go up, because it sounded political to people, and that didn't really match their idea of what they were doing for a living. But then when I just use that little elevator speech of my job is to level the playing field, and you look at social justice, and the whole march is about getting to level the playing field so that we all have rights and access to the same opportunities, it turns out that we're all social justice workers. Nowadays, when I ask that question, almost every hand in the room goes up. So we're getting, as a country, to learn what that means, and that's helping us. I think that helps us bring this language into our field. This has really helped me because when you look at marginalization and when you look at the lens of social justice, it gives us some information about how to do our work. So first of all, there's some perspective that we're new at this. When my grandmother was in school, special education was, or when I went to school, special education was right down the hall in a room where everybody was. When my mom went to school, special education was in a different building. When my grandmother went to school, there was no special education. So the perspective that we're still new at this, even though it feels like we really want to change things, we've come so far, it's phenomenal. But the other part of that is to look at the effort that it takes to actually make any change. Why? And I like this social justice model because we can ask the same question of all the women in the room. How long have we been working on leveling the playing field for pay for the same work that our male counterpart is doing? Now, I'm 59 now. I've been talking about this for much of my life, exposed to it for much of my life. Why, when we have the knowledge that the issue is there, why can't we turn on a dime and just, make it right? And that has to do with this social justice lens. When we're talking about institutionalized oppression, we're talking about structures that exist that we weren't there to vote on, build, etc. When we're talking about structures for people with disabilities, that's the story too. Those structures were built without them at the table. And when we're talking about not having the same life experience, if I'm not in that group, then I have my own limitations of understanding what that is. And then those limitations are really going to start to play into how we build tools for populations that process differently than we do. So when we're talking about systemic oppression, then we need, it requires address with a long-term dynamic plan. So when I'm working with teams, not only are we talking about here's a specific tool, we're talking about where is that in your strategic plan for the company? How do you use that when you're orienting new staff? Where is that in your intake paperwork when you're meeting a new customer or a new student? Where are the goals? How does that carry through? Communication and money for me in my lifetime have been the mainstay of what I do. Create ways to level the playing field about these two topics. It's a source of power, great source of power, and it's often impacted in the most significant way for people with significant disabilities. I teach a workshop called Communication You Don't Say, and the picture on the right there kind of sums it up. Here's somebody drowning, waving their hand in the air, and the lifeguard is taking it as a wave and waving back instead of understanding the gesture. We have these in our fields, very clear outcomes of what happened when there's this level of miscommunication about attempts of trying to get meaning across to another human being. Because I work with the non-linguistic population, that's been the most of my career, is the person who goes and finds the closet with $30,000 worth of equipment that nobody knows how to use and it's broken. In that population of folks who have been walking down that path with different devices, trying different things, people who don't share the same language system that's in the mainstream. And we see two overdeveloped personality traits. They exist in all of us, but two overdeveloped traits. One is, now I'm passive. I meet an adult, they've graduated school, they will go anywhere with me and do anything and smile the entire time. It's almost difficult to understand what their preferences are because they're so willing to do everything. The other side of that is the person who will kill me with their eyelash if they can. Like, we see too much of the population that we serve with these personality traits very developed, very loud. And it's a direct result of a lack of power. It's a direct result of this marginalization. When I work with this population of folks, I use the analogy of the feral child. So it's addressing the injury of low power status. If I am hitting my chin and one of you thinks I'm talking about my mom and somebody else thinks I'm hungry and somebody else thinks it's a stimulation behavior, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then even if I initially had communicative intent, it will go away because I can never standardize that action into meaning. So even if I had attempt at vocabulary, it doesn't standardize because nobody shares it with me. Now, I talk about that person as the feral child, somebody who's essentially going to go back into the woods and take care of themselves because we aren't trustworthy to understand what they need. That sense of the feral child also came to mind specifically because it is very difficult when someone is habituated to that level of care for themselves, and we have been so untrustworthy, to be willing to get that, to work on things, ways that that individual is willing to come back out of the woods. So when we talk about strategies for building the tools that I'm going to talk about and show you today, we're going to talk about always starting with something that's so motivating. It is worth your time to come out and try to trust me so that you can get what it is that you're motivated to get. And we talk about this in terms of shifting compliance to alliance. Excuse me, sorry there. And what I mean by that, I don't mean compliance like I'm going to be the boss of you and I mean to be. It means you have to look to me to get your information. I'm going to teach you this job and I'm going to cue you every day and train you every day until you get it. Or I'm going to cue you about every single step of how to make that food for yourself. If the service system is basing your success on your relationship with me, then what happens when you don't work with me anymore? And we know in our field, when students are in school, you might have a very stable set of folks that are working with you, a teacher and a para who you might know for many years. But when you get into the adult service system, that's over for most people. The transition rates are very high. So if nothing was built to take with you, how do you keep the bar high? We spent all this time using my relationship to develop this beautiful, way of I understand you, I see you, I know what you need, I know how to read you. And then with the next person, you have to start all over again. How long will you tolerate that? So that feral child status, that low power status, is born of, I don't have a way to represent myself. I don't have reference tools that I can use. And compliance to alliance means I'm going to move from being the relationship and the point of understanding or the way to support you to navigate in this world to, I'm going to find out what's motivating for you and I'm going to help you build the way there so that we have some kind of reference tool that you're going to use, be able to use and share with everybody in your world. I look at the mind like it's a file cabinet. And even though I come from deafblindness, this is not about deafblindness. It's about modality loss and processing loss that functions like deafblindness. It's like needing access to a different language. It certainly brings in the tactile necessity, understanding the tactile clarity and succinctness of communication and how to pair those things together. So I look at some research that really helps me understand why these things are so important. Because you and I, essentially when I talk about mind deafness or mind blindness, what I'm saying is, okay, it might be going in your ear, but then what the nerve is doing with it by the time it gets to your brain, what your brain does with it, and then how it comes back out is different than the masses. And same with visual information. Even though blindness has very specific accommodations, we know that folks on the autism spectrum have issues with the visual nerve, understanding how that information is going in and what to look at. I have so many stories about that, and we'll go down that road another day. In any case, there's some really cool research studies that help us understand what that means in terms of access and environments. There's a research study back in the 70s by Risley and Hart that is included in a lot of blind education materials. And in the research study, they looked at what is it that you know? What is it that you're using every day? What's in your brain that you're accessing to actually function as a human being? And here are the stats they came out with. 92% of what you know, you learned incidentally. It was around you, this amazing computer of your brain put it together and organized it so much. It's made to do that, to help you organize, categorize, and relate things together. 92% of what you know. So imagine, and 6% of what you know, you learn because you're watching somebody else's experience. So Serena touches the fireplace and burns her hand and she's crying, and I know that I'm not going to need to touch that fireplace now. Sorry, Serena, but I'm learning from watching other people's experiences together. 2% of what you retain and use in your life is someone intentionally teaching you something. Sorry, our whole school system. Certainly, we understand that there's a lot more than that to it. But the essence of the idea that I have to look to the environment to get my information, or that's where I'm going to get most of my information, is the key point to make here. The next research study, Sugata Mitra, many people know this study. He's a man from India. He decided, he's a researcher, and he wanted to define the necessity of the right teacher makes the right learning experience for students, has greater success. He went to India, a very remote village where kids had not seen computers before, and he mud and taped one into a wall so they couldn't get to the back of it, and just taught them how to turn it on, how to use the mouse, how to get online. That was it. A month later, came back and said, how do you like using the computer? And they said, we stopped. And he's thinking to himself, great, I'm going to be the great international speaker about this. I'm on to something. And then his next question is, when did you stop? And he said, well, we programmed it into Punjabi. We found the language interpreter, and the language, how to bridge the language barrier. We found the free games. They're really easy. And then they wanted us to pay. We're not going to pay. And that's what had actually stopped them from continuing. He changed his research to environments rich in motivation and access. And these things are telling us when I'm working with an individual who's got a variance of processing and in communication development, access to communication, then if they don't see the model around them, it's not going to get in. If nobody else is using it, it's very difficult to onboard and retain skill sets that are necessary for the level of growth that we want for all human beings. So we are going to talk about some of those ways to get those things in. Part of this interaction as well begins, of course, with the etiquette of approach. Now, you're all, in the field and very expert, expert level folks who are already doing this, have experience understanding how to meet the person where they are. And again, we're going to look at how the way we organize ourselves as someone without a disability or without an intellectual developmental disability. If you're here today, you're listening to language, you're reading language, people who can't do that, who are not accessing material in the same way, we're going to talk about how we project onto them, how we organize ourselves, and that becomes an issue. So for etiquette approach, that's the place to start, of course. How are you orienting to me? Are you with me when I start? What senses are you using to bring focus? What kind of processing time? What kind of exposure do you have to the model? Am I modeling it for you first? And there are three places where I get really big teachings about this. Some of you might know John Gottman. He's famous for being the person who can meet you and your partner and with more than 90% accuracy, predict whether you're going to be together in 5 years or not. He's the relationship guru. He built a lab at the University of Washington, and with a camera in the public spaces of it, invited couples to come spend the weekend and then just really studied their relationships together. What works in relationship and what doesn't. And started to put together very strong tools, foundational tools for building strong relationship skills. If you don't know him, go. Both he and Julie are just the most delightful people. Anyway, one of the things that they said in their research, which really profoundly impacted me, it was one of those moments where, when the cartoon character runs into something and their head goes, ay, 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 that was the moment. They said the first 3 minutes of an interaction, when stress is present in the interaction, is going to predict the outcome of the interaction, regardless of what you try to do in the middle. Even if you blow it in the first 5 minutes and then you try to repair it, the how you started is going to influence the outcome. Now, this became really profound because I had to start looking at how students were engaging with me in those first 3 minutes. Actually, what I meant to say there was how I'm engaging with students. If you don't know this book, Naoki Higashida is a young Japanese man, and at 10 years old, he wrote this book with his counselor, essentially in Q&A form, the whole thing. He's on the spectrum, and it's his experience. It's not a book, an educational book about autism, but it certainly gives you insight into him and very, in many ways, applicable things that for many kids on the spectrum. But this question really jumped out at me when the partner says, "Why do you ignore us when we're talking to you?" And he says, and I'm just going to summarize it. He says, when somebody's far away and they're talking to you and you don't know they're talking to you, and you're saying to yourself right now, "Of course I do. Sure, that happens." He says, "Yeah, well, that happens to us when you're right in front of us. So it would really help if you said our names first." And I about fell over, because I've been working with kids on the spectrum my entire career and not knowing that they weren't with me in those first 3 minutes. Because in those first 3 minutes, if they're not actually here with me and I'm starting to give instruction and I'm starting to move forward and they're still not oriented to me, even with full eye contact on me, what they're doing with their eyes is not the same as me. How they're processing information is not the same as me. Here I am offering something or evaluating and diagnosing what they can and cannot do and designing tools specific to what they can and cannot do, all based on the fact that I didn't initiate the conversation in a way that was accessible to them. So that one blew me away, as well as this one. For anybody who hasn't seen this before, Homunculus is a model that was drawn by an OT, an occupational therapist, to show sensory weight on the body. And you'll see by this that the hands, the feet, and the mouth are enormous. And that's where most of your nervous system is taking in information to create, to put together meaning. And if you see a baby on its back, that'll succinctly describe to you how clear that is. The baby is playing with a toy with its feet, its hands, and its mouth, because that's how it's gathering most of its information. Now here's the other kind of shocking what happens in the first 3 minutes. I work in deafblindness. I mean, when I work with children across the country, I will work with teachers and families who are taking a child's hand on top to teach them something. They take the hand, they move it over. Oh, I realized I didn't have my light on here. I was going to show you this little light example. I know I'm in a little square in your screen, but I'm going to give you an example of if I want to teach somebody how to turn this on and off by pressing this little button. Typically what we do is we put our hand on top of somebody else's and we model it. We show them how to do that. And what that does is engage the startle reflex. Even if somebody's not jumping anymore, it's internally the person is saying, hey, what do you want? What is this? I'm trying hard to understand the expectation. It lacks a model before action. So what we want to start to do is learn how to offer under so that I'm modeling it and I'm teaching you that I'm going to put my hand under yours and I'm going to actually show you some film of this that's going to be a little bit more clear so that you can engage more independently. And what that does, this change might seem minor, but when you start to practice it at home and you start to pay attention to the fact that our habits as sighted folks are going to be to reach in, hand-eye coordination does that. I want to give you information that way. But what that does actually is teach you cue dependence. It teaches you to wait for me. If I'm demonstrating something to you with my hand under yours, I can actually feel your intrinsic motivation for mastery kick in. You will start to explore, you will come forward because the structure of our relationship and the structure of this teaching is my hand under yours and offering it to you and waiting for you to move forward. So when that kicks in, when you start to move forward, I can support you to continue to learn from where you are, as opposed to if my hand is on top of yours, I'm teaching you to wait for me to give it to you. So I'm sorry to say, folks, all of us have contributed to that cue dependence simply because of these strategies that we have as folks who don't process the same way as the person who's sitting across from us. Now, here's the time when I would love to have 2 volunteers from the audience, and this is what the expectation is going to be. I'm actually going to put a picture up on the wall, you know what I mean. I'm going to put a picture up on the screen, and one person is not going to look at it. And then the other person is going to describe to them without using any words, no language, no sign language, no spoken language. They're going to describe to them what's on the screen. So we have 2 people here. I see Andrew McQuaid. I could not be more delighted. So everyone excuse me while I squeal. McHugh, it's so good to see you.
Jennifer, it's like I was talking to you this morning or something.
What the what? Oh, I'm so excited to see you. That's fantastic. And then we'll have another person. This is great because Andrew actually has some experience doing this as well. So he's got a little savvy. And even still, because it's not how we process, it'll be a challenge. And who's our second person? Do we have a second person coming on?
Yes, Jenny.
Excellent. Great, Jenny. I'm so glad you're both here. And I really cannot commend you enough for being willing to show up with that level of courage to be in public and you don't even know what to expect. Wow. Andrew did, but I mean, McHugh knew somewhat, but Jenny, good on you. All right. So Andrew, I'm going to have you put your head down so you're not looking at the screen, and I'm going to show Jenny this picture. Go back to this. All right. And Jenny, you're not going to use any language, so you can't say anything out loud. He's not going to guess out loud while you're trying to do something. You're just going to give it your best effort to describe to him what you're seeing up here on this screen right now. Okay? I'm going to stop sharing the screen in just a second. You have a good sense of what's on there. So now it's just going to be us as a group so that he's not going to see it when he picks his head back up. Andrew, I think we're ready for you. Okay, Jenny, go ahead and give it your best shot. All right, McHugh, what's she describing to you?
It seemed like something rising, like a sun rising and a storm happening.
Beautiful. The sun rising and a storm happening. Good on you, Jen. So hang on just a second. I'm going to pull this back up and we're just going to look at this slide with a little bit of information about, I brought it up, but I didn't screen share it with you. Sorry about that. A lot of buttons here. Okay, let me bring that back up and push this little button down here. I'm sorry, you guys. I moved the pictures of them up. There you go. Okay, so when we look at this, there are things that come forward around how we organize ourselves as hearing people, right? We're listening to spoken language. We've got some deaf folks in the audience today too. This is going to make a lot more sense to you than it does to everybody who's hearing here. And just to clarify, ASL lives in the left brain, right? All language lives in the left brain. But the beautiful thing about deafness and visual language is that it utilizes more of the organization of the right brain because it's a visual language. It's still full language, but it's a visual language. So these rules will apply to visual languages. English is like a movie. You start at the beginning and you get to the end. We see Jenny walking down the path in the woods. That's how the movie opens. It's dark, it's nighttime. We hear the owl, we see the moon in the sky and go, Jenny, don't go. There's danger in those woods. But we don't know what's going to happen to Jenny until the end of the movie, right? Or we might know what happens, but we won't know the point until the very end. The visual brain needs access in the opposite order. It's topic comment. So it's like a newspaper that says Jenny Lux abducted by aliens to teach world peace. Now I know, Jen, we're glad you survived that, Jenny. So now we know, now my brain goes, oh, I understand where we're headed. And I can pick up the details and put them together in relationship to each other, which is so necessary for me to understand, to get to comprehension. So you're going to see that Jenny is going to start, we're all going to not know where to start or how to put these things in relationship to each other. Because in ASL, for all the deaf folks, of course, in here, even if you're not allowed to sign, so I'm not going to sign house, but even if I put some kind of structure, because it was there first, and then a tornado comes, and then I see the house starting to strain, I can see the relationship between these two things. And that gives me more meaning. But we are habituated to a different order that's going to continue to get in our way. All right, so now Jenny's going to put her head down. McHugh's going to look at a picture. And if anybody doesn't know Andrew McQuaid, call him McHugh for the rest of your relationship with him. It's a loving moniker given by some beautiful people who know him. Okay, so now Jenny's head is down. McHugh, I'm going to put the next picture up, and this is the one that I want you to describe. So we'll give it just a second for you to look at it. Oops. It's not, there you go. All right, Jenny, you can put your head up.
Okay.
McHugh's going to describe this to you. Now, again, you can't guess out loud either. Neither of you are using language. Go ahead, McHugh. Beautiful. Jenny, what is he, again, round of applause for you guys, from all of us. So Jenny, what is McHugh describing to you?
It looked like he was describing some type of bird that was grabbing something out of the air, like maybe an insect or something.
All right, good job. So hang on just a second. We're going to bring this back up. All right, I have to keep moving these things. Beautiful. So here's the picture. There's a duck reaching for a fly. Good job, McHugh. Good job, Jenny. Now, what we typically do in this interaction as English speakers, and McHugh's got some experience with this and did such a beautiful job. And wow, a duck's bill, that was good. That was impressive. The structural strategies that we typically run into is we try to separate out concepts. Like if I wanted to talk about an old man, first I might do a man, and then I'll do something old. And now in the person's mind across from me, I've developed two characters that I can't undo. We separate concepts out. That's how English works. It's word order. I add the adjective, I add the adverb. And the takeaway is be the duck. Right? You want to succinctly note all of the movement and the adjectives and the action in the characters themselves, and then how they interact with each other is a whole nother class. And that takes, right, that takes some real doing to get to understanding how to undo the English as your worst enemy as a strong and succinct visual communicator. I want to note that the visual brain and the organization of visual information is the basis of all universal design. For fully blind folks, still born with the visual brain, because what you see is based on matter. It's the same structural organization between things. So the more we can focus on taking English out, the better off we'll be. An example of one of the places to start when I'm working on McHugh Wants Ice Cream. I don't need a picture system that has a picture of McHugh and a picture of Want. We want to build it from his point of view and start with the topic and move on from there. I'm going to give you some solid examples of that. Jenny McHugh, I can't thank you enough. Huge applause for you. You can go off camera now. You did such a beautiful job. Thank you for being our brave souls who opted in to give people a solid example of that today. All right. Okay, so we spend 2 days at a workshop together. When I teach communication, you don't say. And for the first day, we take away all language skills and work on what comes up naturally, because it will come up naturally to you. And then the second day, we build the tools to bridge some of those conundrums. I love this quote by George Bernard Shaw: "The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place." I've done this 2-day workshop for 30 years, and I love when married couples come, because the feedback I get from married individuals is, "This is the best therapy we've ever had. We didn't really realize how much we were missing from each other." That, or they want a divorce before we leave. All right. The other thing is, once we take the language away, then we put blindfolds on. Now, again, this is when we're talking about mind blindness and mind deafness, we're talking about taking away the way that we typically process with our ears and our eyes, because those are our main organizational tools. And when we don't use that as our primary way to come to something, it starts to build a level of organization and access that will create you to be the most succinct communicator. When I come in and meet a new student or a new adult, oftentimes what I hear when I meet somebody who has behavior as communication, and that's really all they have at this point in time, or somebody who just isn't really willing to interact, and I come in and I bring some things and I hear again and again, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen this before. It looks like magic." Now, I was young when I started, and stupid, and so I thought, hey, there's a plus to my ego. I really know what I'm doing. And then the tragedy hit, that the right accommodation is so far away from that person that it looks like magic when it shows up. This is how much we are projecting the organization of us onto the other across from us. And this is the reason to wear blindfolds and the reason to take away language and do non-linguistic exercises, is that we want to start learning what happens if those aren't the two primary ways to control what's happening to me or how to communicate something. There is no such thing as a simulation activity, just so you know. I cannot ever understand what it is to be blind when I put a blindfold on. What it can do for me, however, is build a new file in my file cabinet. Oh, if I'm not coming to it with my eyes, what would happen? Because of this level of I've been trained, right, for so long, my brain's going to run with its habits. It's going to be reinforced every day. I'm going to continue to get support to keep doing what I'm doing, put my hand on other people, because that's how I organize myself, which means you have to really make an intentional plan to change your habits. When I teach this workshop and we get into the blindfolded section, I will tell people this hand over hand, hand under hand is very difficult to change. We're going to put blindfolds on. We're going to do this exercise. And I tell people, no one, not one. And I've been doing this training and made up this exercise and started it, 30 years ago. Not once has someone mastered it in the first try. Your brain won't let you do it, which of course invigorates the audience to go, I'll show you, I'm going to be the, and what they end up doing, are things like this. So funny. I'm gonna take this down just a second to show. They do things like this. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and offer this under somebody's hand and let them be the boss of it and learn how to explore. So here's my hand underneath theirs. But you know where my other hand is? My other hand is on their forearm, guiding them to move along with me. Or my hand is on top of, underneath theirs, but I'm still have my thumb over them. There's some portion of us that still doesn't know how to navigate that level of offering through the tactile body. And that's something you want to get really good at. So play these games at home. I have lots more of them. If you're interested in them, please let me know. I'm happy to share the home version of how to continue to develop this, strengthening of those skills. Okay, I'm just pulling this up. Fantastic. Okay, so I love this quote by Mark Twain, and the habit cannot be tossed out a window. It must be coaxed down the stairs a step at a time. All right. Now here we're going to get into the tools. We look at what we call person-driven tools. We love that we have been person-centered for so long. It's vital that I understand the person across from me, and it's vital that I see them as an individual and build specifically for them. We want to elevate person-centered into person-driven, and that's what I was talking about before, where I'm going to use my good relationship with you to develop a tool that you can take with you and will continue to work for you. Now, we want to put everything in your hands so that you can be the author of that reference tool. So even if you would throw a camera and it would shatter into 1,000 pieces, if you're willing to put the ring around your, first of all, I want to show it to you enough that you're motivated because it's going to get you something that you want. And then your tolerance for me and your capacity to concentrate and focus is going to shift. So if I'm starting with what you love and what you want to do, and I'm going to give you some solid models of that here soon, then it's going to be much easier for you to engage appropriately with the tools themselves. And if you're somebody who absolutely can't do it or doesn't have the motorical control to do it, I'm still going to do it with you so that everything is taken from your point of view. We always label everything with the same vocabulary, not because the individuals needs to read, but because we want everybody calling it the same thing and using the same vocabulary. These selfie printers, yes, it's actually called a selfie printer, are amazing. It's portable, it has a battery pack that can be charged. So I have many, many stories of, okay, I meet this woman who's now an adult living out in the community, and she has been in jail on the psych ward a dozen times before I meet her. And she's made up her own language system. People don't understand what it is. And the thing that triggers her the most is she gets bigger and louder trying to make herself clear. And it scares the person across from her because she's a very large woman. And then she ends up, getting, then people call all kinds of services because they don't know what to do. So we build a camera, we use this camera printer system. I find out the thing she loves the most is a mocha. So we take this system to the coffee shop. She orders her coffee, I order mine. We take pictures of, we ask the barista to write the title right on the cup. We take pictures of it, we print it right there, we label it right there. And then I come back tomorrow and we take the pictures without talking and hand them to the barista, who is able to read them and make us our drinks. And this woman's all pleased with her, excited because it's actually working. I'm modeling it. She's got the access to seeing how it works without the expectation on her. If there's one thing that if I could change one law, and believe me, there are many I would like to change, but if I could start with every communication goal, I would like written for the team and not the person. If we can standardize ourselves and get the right tools in place, people are able to come forward in a much more human and functional way than when I'm writing a goal for them and bringing 30 minutes of therapy a week to try to work on that skill set. Now, I'm a teacher, so I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm trashing the system that we have. What we have is vital and necessary and beautiful and to be celebrated. And we want to expand it so that we're including some things that move beyond the therapy session, which is made to shore up a specific skill set. The model's got to be broader and moved into the classroom and other environments. And when we build tools that are made to travel with the person, we have more capacity to do that. So this woman, we've taken the picture, we've ordered our coffees. She sits down, we have our coffee, it's fantastic. And the next day we go back and I offer, to a gesture that she should go first, and she's shocked, like, really? And she goes up and hands the barista her coffee and gets her coffee drink. And then the next day we drive to the coffee shop and she won't let me get out of the car. That's who I have to meet. I have to meet the person who has that level of mastery, motivation, and access, that she doesn't need me for it and wants to do it on her own. And if I'm evaluating anything else, then I'm often evaluating your willingness to comply with a system that you don't really understand when we're talking about this level of confusion or this level of variance in how you process and how I process. So I want to find the person underneath that rebel. And the pitchfork and shovel here is, I've read the file, I see how you interact with your world, I see your behavior plan, I see all of these things. Now I need to find you. So I'm going to start with what's motivating. We're going to use these portable systems so you can start to actually get what you want. And then we're going to build from there. So I do a lot of books with kids where we take pictures, the kids write the stories. This is a deaf child out on the tundra. He's a Yupik young man, and he's learning how to sign, and he's making books with his peers in order to be able to show them the signs. Now, ASL shouldn't be two-dimensional, right? It's hard to pick it up that way, but they had limited access to technology, so we were making film versions and book versions. But this is kind of a really cool way to start to use technology and these cameras and printers, this low-tech stuff. Because in adult life, this applies in a very profound way. This is Reed Zimmer. He goes to work we support him in his job. And he is somebody who is non-linguistic. He's deaf for all intents and purposes, and didn't learn how to sign growing up, and has Down syndrome. And so when we got together and started using this system, he was able to cross environments. Something happened at home, or something happened, I took a vacation, and now I can go to work and talk about it. I can show you, you can see what's possible. And in the same way, we can do the same, we can use the same model. I'm bringing in pictures. Look what I saw, a bear in my yard. Look, I took a picture. So we're starting to communicate in ways that are more solid. Nowadays in high tech, we've got the tool of the masses and all of us on YouTube and all of us sharing visually, so even better. And we're going to get to the high-tech stuff. But starting this low-tech exchange of here's what I did and showing pictures can be very profound because, like I say here, pictures can tell a story that Reed's language can't. And then, of course, we take these things. I'm going to move through these slides fairly quickly, and you have access to them, so you can go back and read it later. But I mostly want to get into, I'm going to talk through them and summarize them. But the point I want to make with this slide is it's vital when you make systems with people that they're not in them. If it's for them to track something, here's how I make a smoothie, here's my tasks at work. It's not Reed performing the job. It's from his point of view what the job should look like. How the job, what the job looks like, especially when it's done. Just like the earlier exercise with McHugh and Jenny, we want to put the topic first. So when I'm building those systems, I start with the end and then take the steps to get there. But this is Reed's first, before we had iPads, access to iPads, he was building his own work tasks in order so that he knew what to do. Now, Reed was deemed unemployable because he's the guy who would stand and wait for you to tell him what to do. He would stand for 4 hours waiting for you to tell him what to do. He's so terrified of not, knowing how to move forward successfully. So we work on building this, using this camera and printer with his boss, showing us, training us on the job. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. Where I've supported Reed to learn how to use the camera. I still support stabilizing the camera. He's taking pictures, we're printing them out. The boss is putting them in the order that he wants them done. It's all set up on the left-hand side or on that strip. And then on the other side, when he finishes something, he takes the picture off and he moves it over. And now he knows how to propel through his entire work task. So you can get very complicated to address more concrete, more abstract things. I'm not going to get into that here. Again, there's language on these slides that describe it to you so you can learn more about it. And lots of you have lots of experience with it. But the essence of it is that he's making it himself. His boss is in on it with him. A new job comes around and they don't call me, Jennifer, come in, we need new pictures of Reed's tasks. He waves to Reed and gestures for camera, and Reed brings it over and they take a picture and put that in the system. Other therapists in the rehab department also are taking a picture and saying, hey, can you do this one right now? Or we're not going to do that one today, or hey, this needs to go in a different order. So it gives Reed a level of mastery and his team a level of access that we didn't have before. We use cameras and printers a lot to make cooking lessons. That's how we train these tools often, because it can be very motivating for people to get their hands on, making their own things. And we use things like color-coded measuring cups and color-coded containers so that people don't have to know how to measure in order to be successful. We create low-tech kits, and if you want more information about this, please reach out to me. We're building lesson plans specific to cooking and building things at home, especially in this crazy time when we're trying to get services to people with significant disabilities in this virtual world. So the person gets a home kit, we have a home kit, and over the virtual world, we're working step by step to capture the recipe, to build the recipe together, to learn how to use the camera and printer. And so there's the communication, the low-tech piece of communication. And then we move into financial literacy, because this is, again, one of those very low power status. People with developmental disabilities in particular don't have access to money. Even if they're working, they might not touch their money. It's going to a payee. And this is a profound, pivotal point for me in my career as well. I've been doing it for a long time, and it hit me one day like, what? Wait a minute. I love what I do, but I wouldn't be working at the level I am if it wasn't bringing me opportunities to choose how to spend that money. So we had to work very hard on how to access that same information. This is a picture on the left here of a money jig. We have a sublimated picture of $1, and on the other side, there are holes for 4 quarters and thumb, spaces, so it's easy to get in and out. And we connect the dots between production and earnings. Most of the people we work with are like the feral child, being drug out of the woods into a workplace. And if they're willing to comply, fantastic. It's not that they're not getting all kinds of other things from work, like relationships and satisfaction to contribute, but understanding performance levels comes directly tied to dollars. Production equals earnings. So are you meeting the employer's expectations? Because if you aren't, you might not keep your job. So we want to build tools that allow access to that. You can't use somebody's money that they have to earn back. So we have a request for money letter that we share with people that essentially says, look, you and I met our first employer and learned this lesson really quickly. And so hasn't had that opportunity. We're looking for $200 in the year just to help somebody connect these dots. And it works in a profound way. This is Trep. Trep was staffed 3 people to 1 when I met him. And we worked with that communication, that picture camera and printer system to order out in public, just like the example I gave you about the woman. And that helped him be much more curious about me and much more interested in working with me, because when we were together, this is what we were doing. It helped him become willing to go with me to workplaces, and we use the camera and picture to take pictures of things and such. He now has been working stably for years, and he's developed 2 new vocabulary words and signs. He gets up in the morning and he says to his residential support person, work, to find out if it's a work day. And then he gets to work and he sets up the space and he points to his coach and says, money? So the power of that access. This is Chris. Chris has been in lived his entire early years in an institution and worked in a workshop, in a sheltered workshop. And he's the guy who will talk all day just to engage people. I like your earrings. Hey, lady, what's your name? All day long. So his production, of course, was never competitive. So they deemed him unemployable. We had to just put very clear parameters on those expectations. Here's how much time you have to do this piece. Here's the picture of the job. Here's the money jig. When you get done building those things, if you're doing it in the, following the timer, then fantastic. You've earned that money and you can buy something right now. We go to the dollar store ahead of time and pick things out. He was working for Harley Davidson stickers that day and got them. So there's the low tech version. And then of course there are high tech versions, but the essence of connect the dots between production and earnings, savings, and spending. This is a simple worksheet that in a pie chart shows me what I'm earning, what I'm spending, and the money I have left. and then another column chart, a bar chart showing me, oh, I'm working towards saving for a TV. The big screen TV is going to cost me $400, and I'm watching myself get there. There are apps too, like Mint, and there's lots of budgeting apps that are worthwhile. Spendy's one that actually has a fairly clear visual about how the things I'm spending my money on. And it also gives me icons for those things. So sometimes that's a little bit more accessible for folks. This is the app that we built that Serena started to tell you about, called Work Autonomy. We, when iPads came out, we got educated about them right away. And when we went into the App Store, everything that we found that was made for people with disabilities was essentially made for a 5-year-old and full of cartoon characters. And we're working on in a professional environment and competitive employment. Plus, we'd already had these low-tech versions of, I want the person to build it themselves. I want them to connect the money. So we built a new app called Work Autonomy. And it allows people to capture information using video, photo, text, or sound, or a combination of those. It lets them choose their colors and all of that. But it lets them set parameters with their boss about the expectations of the job. And then when they're running the app, it actually spits out a chart that they can send. It's developing a chart so that they can see how they're doing in comparison with the employer's expectations. So instead of me becoming the surrogate employer, Eric is able to look at this chart and see if he's meeting his boss's expectations. He also has a clear, concrete way to talk to his boss about a raise or more hours if he's exceeding those expectations. When you're setting the parameters, you can set a timer to see how long somebody's working on something. You can time up or time down. So when we're teaching efficiency, sometimes we're using a down timer. We used time down for breaks, things like that. There's a clock, so you know how much time is left in your shift. And then there's a counter where you can count up or count down. Oh, there's 15 hotel rooms to turn over. Or I've built 300 trays for ICU today. So it measures that. And you can look at the day, the week, or the month's version of the chart. And Eric, sends it to his boss, and his boss replies back saying, hey, this is looking good, or what happened on this day? It allows an employer to know when to step in and gives them information about performance. The other chart on here, and why I'm giving you a prequel to the high-tech stuff that we're going to get into next, this is coming first because there's another chart that it puts out. You can put in the data of how many hours per week you're working and what your wage is per hour, and it'll put this other chart out for you as well. So you can see yourself earning money. And if you didn't finish some shifts or missed work, it shows you how much money you are losing. And then these are the numbers that you can take off to put into that higher level chart, that higher level budgeting sheet that I showed you. Now, I have some film clips, and I'm thinking that maybe I'll stop before I get too much into the rest of the high-tech stuff and share a little film clip with you, if that sounds good to you. I've broken this up. It's chunky. It's from a lot of different films. So just know that I'm gonna share something, and it's going to be parts of different films. So this is not made to be one smooth film, but I want to go back to that low tech piece and that hand under hand work and show you a little bit about it. I'm going to turn the volume up here on my screen to make sure. There you go. Here we go.
Hand under hand teaching strategies. Hand under hand teaching strategies are being used in everyday activities. Instead of reaching over someone's hand, which reinforces cue dependence, hand under hand allows us to model until the student's intrinsic motivation for mastery kicks in, and we feel them move forward to try it themselves. More on hand under hand at the end of this film. Building visual systems with cameras and portable printers. At Diamond High School, Letty students have been learning to build their own low-tech reference tools. Adonis has been curious and engaged in the process of building a visual system using a camera and printer. Here we see him taking photos he then printed for a cooking activity made accessible by switches. Switches allow someone such as Pele to access activities like using a mixer with the touch of a switch. Adonis collaborated with classmates to complete a visual recipe sequence. The system was offered to Pele, who eagerly made her own pudding, involved in the entire process, grinning ear to ear. Creating access with switch implementation. In Jessica's class, Humphrey is supporting switch implementation to increase the connection between cause and effect and to increase self-determination through choice making. We use motivating leisure activities to begin. First, Sean captures photos to clearly label the switches and what they activate. Jennifer models introducing choice making.
Want to do it again? Put your hand on top of mine. We're just going to go like this now and let go. You don't have to hold on to it anymore. It's collecting the bubbles.
Which one do you want? Bubbles. Push your
Push it, let go. There you go. There we go. I know.
Jessica quickly gains expertise and offers each student a choice between switches.
The lights or the bubbles? Bubbles. Okay, here they go.
Tegan. Tegan is a student who has struggled to engage with new tasks throughout his school years. You can see here that his ability to readily understand visual instructions keeps him in charge of the task. Now Tegan is able to stay engaged for longer periods, 35 minutes on this day. Reading visual steps to make a smoothie, he is motivated by an intrinsic desire for mastery, instead of following cues from a teacher or peer. The power of person-driven tools. The ability to reference schedules, expectations, and task analysis in the format of their choice increases student motivation and independence, and reduces the need for cues from support staff. In 3 short months, you can see this project catalyzing engagement and success. Chris. In preparation for his transition into a new classroom, Chris created a self-advocacy film. Captioned, voiced, video footage allows him to
All right, we got too far along. Sorry about that. It is a funny thing to navigate in between these screens. So sure, I'm sorry about that. Let me get this PowerPoint back up, because I have film of different parts of this. And here we go. So back to the PowerPoint. Here we go. Thanks you guys for your patience as I do navigate through this. Okay, so Steve Jobs changed the world. I wanted to, sorry, before we really move into the high tech, give you just some visuals of students and adults using the camera and printer and the kinds of things that, that we're seeing because of it. Now we're going to move into more high tech tools, just looking at how profoundly our world has changed. Steve Jobs changed the game. He did. There were mobile devices before Apple developed the iPad, but they were essentially trying to be mini computers. Steve Jobs, I don't know if he had any idea, but he's a visual processor. He's a visual organizer. He organizes in, using the visual brain and built the tool that way. So it's much more accessible to most of the people that we work with. In fact, you'll see that we teach a lot of iPad trainings, not because we like Apple more than Microsoft or Google, but because when we're working with someone who's never touched a device before, it makes more sense to them. So if I want to edit something, I touch it and the menu that I can utilize to change that thing comes forward. As opposed to on a Surface or an Android, I have to know the menu to go find that thing. And that's a profound difference when you're trying to give access to this kind of tool. And it's in the hand of the masses, like we talked about, which means the model is everywhere. So that immersion story has changed drastically. People don't need me. In fact, the 4-year-old and the 7-year-old down the hallway are probably going to have more skill than I do around newer stuff that's coming out. Hopefully not the 4-year-old, but the 14-year-old is what I meant to say. We start with this question of, here's how I'm using my device. How can I get that same information into your hands? The statistics are abysmal about people with disabilities and access to this level of this kind of technology. Some because people were afraid that it was only going to be entertainment and not really understanding the potential for accommodation. We hear a lot, well, they like to play on the device, and I'm like, good, because then they know how to use it. We want to use play to teach somebody how to touch this device, and for me to evaluate how to teach them on this device. Just so you know too, I am 59 and I'm not having a stroke. Hot flashes. You're going to see me turn red if you look at me at all in these next couple of minutes, and I didn't want anybody to worry. All right, so this puzzle app is something that we use a lot when we're evaluating someone's capacity to use it and what kind of accommodations they might need structured to be successful. This is Eugene. We take a picture of ourselves together, and then we put it in this app And we break it apart just into 4 parts to start with, but it goes, you know, you can break it into many more pieces, and then slide those pieces back together to make the whole picture again. So again, it teaches me somebody's ability to differentiate between a tap, a double tap, a press, and a hold and slide, all of that. Photo booth is something else that's very playful, and almost everybody that we work with loves this app. It's the House of Mirrors app. You can take all kinds of crazy pictures of yourself, but then we can slide those pictures into iMovie, and it really helps me begin to understand how to teach you. Movies are, you know, a native app to every kind of smart device out there on the market. And it is what we use. We're the work autonomy app, and film we use more than anything else. Film is the language of this century. This is how we share stories. This is how we learn things. We go to YouTube, we find out how to do something. I capture stories. I can show them to you even in this virtual world. So we use film for lots of different reasons. We capture a job site so that I can show you where, you know, what some of these places look like. I can travel train that way. I can stay connected to my coworkers right now during COVID. Everybody that we are supporting who has been furloughed from their job is still, you know, having a quick Zoom connection or sending pictures over email and getting them back from their team so that they're staying connected. We use film for person-centered plans. I get to work with this fabulous project, and there was one young man who was pacing in the background as the team was holding his person-centered plan. And just the week before was the very beginning week of our project together, and I brought an iPad in and I just taught him how to play around on it. And I taught him, you know, we took those crazy pictures and put them in iMovie. So he was learning how to use iMovie. And this next week, he has a person-centered plan. I wasn't there, I just heard the story. And here's the team all talking about, you know, hey, Caleb, we're talking about you and what's, you know, he's pacing the room like he usually does with his headphones on. And unbeknownst to them, as they started to get deep into the, you know, person-centered plan, he picked up the iPad and started recording them and started commenting in the film about what they were saying. It's just this amazing moment of what happens when you give access to someone. We make video resumes, and we're going to talk some about that, and self-advocacy films. So if you are working with McHugh and then he leaves and then you're going to work with me, you can show me a film about what you want to tell me about what you need, what you love, how to be supported. Where I should set the bar in the right place. We do video brochures for programs. If I'm working with a transition program, you can make a video brochure for the employers in your community to educate them about what you do and make a little pitch for, you know, partnership with them. And we make customer film files as well. So we have our big paper files on everyone, but again, it's so much more effective to actually capture things on film and show it that we also have customer film files now. Under the same kind of compliance, HIPAA compliance as our paper. We teach people how to make how-to references. So we help them take pictures and put together, this is the way you do it, this is not the way you do it. And these are the things that we want you to have access to be really successful in your filmmaking right out the gate. We have a lot of teaching tools like that. Now, video resumes and film, you're going to see some more video about as I play it for you, but I'm just going to walk you through how we're using these pieces and the feedback that we're getting. You're also going to see that on my website down there, ableops.com, if you go on there, you'll find the video resume section, but this is the actual link to get right to the video, the training about video resumes and the worksheet that you can use side by side with an individual to structure what you're going to capture. And you'll see some examples up there as well. Employers tell us that video references are sometimes the most powerful things to include because it's helpful to hear from a previous employer. The overarching feedback that we get from employers is, oh, now I can see a potential employee rather than the barriers that I didn't understand, you know, what to do with. When we're teaching video resumes, it's a great time to really start to understand what transferable work skills are and how to capture those, from your involvement on a sports team to chores at home to mowing your, you know, neighbor's lawn, all of that, how to actually capture it and put it in vocabulary of competitive employment. We want to make sure that we're building the tools so that the individual is in the lead about all decisions on the content of a video resume. And when we're working with folks in general, like we have job development notebooks that we use a lot of things that help the person stay the author and the lead of our work together. And when we're doing an intake with an individual who's looking for work, our very first conversation is, we're not a headhunter. Our job is to teach you every single tool that you want and can use to be successful on any part of this journey. You can always, depending on us, to support you through these steps, but we want to build things that you can take with you. There's McHugh. I can't believe it. Here he is twice in one day. So mock interviews are something we always recommend, that after you've made a video resume, sit down with employers who can give you feedback about it. On the bottom slide there, the bottom picture, this is Ron after he had made his video. And his video includes how he uses switches to activate different things. And this employer said to him, I didn't even know switches existed. This is so helpful for me. It would help me if you gave me more examples on film so I could really see I could envision you in different tasks on the job. So he did, he made those changes. We teach the Notability app or other note-taking apps. And again, that's a great way to onboard somebody because it's very playful. You can do so many different things with it. It's also a very helpful partner for movies because I can make the pages for qualifications and work, and I can put a bio page on it. I can easily build things that go into film.
Jennifer, this is Allie. I wanted to do a quick time check. So we're at 4:15, 4:16. I wanted to save some time for some Q&A. Do we want to kind of go through the rest of this kind of quickly and then give people a chance to ask you some questions?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was 30 minutes after the hour. Did I write down the wrong time?
That's okay. No worries.
I made myself a note and I wrote the wrong thing down. Yay. Fascinating. There it is. Okay. Yeah. You know what I'd like to do is just skip to the end. How about that? On here, you're going to see there are other apps that you can look at. I really want to also just mention on here that there is some information about employers and things that we're using devices for to understand how to actually talk in a business model to employers. And then what I'd love to be able to do, Allie, if you don't mind, is show the film of people using those higher tech pieces. Is that good?
Yeah.
We do that real quick? Okay. Thanks, folks. I'm sure sorry about that. That just sounds just like me. Okay. Here we go.
Show his new staff and peers more about who he is and what accommodations work the best. Here Chris is sharing his film during the first week of school to set the bar for his communication needs, as well as show off how cool of a guy he is. Isaiah. Last year, Isaiah worked in the coffee shop at Service High School. Orders and task instructions were all written and difficult for him to access. Now he is helping to create and implement a universally accessible symbol system. This tool is built from the lens of a visual processor, making it possible for more students to learn to complete challenging tasks independently. Isaiah used to pour milk and add syrups. Now he is pulling coffee shots, allowing him to work all aspects of the job.
And what do you notice about working in coffee shop now that there are pictures for all of the different drinks?
Creating accessible reference tools for students working in the coffee shop at Service High School. At Service's coffee shop.
I'm just going to scoot through here because that's how we built the system, but I do want to get into the fact that he then learned how to put all the coffee drinks on the Work Autonomy app.
Isaiah now utilizes Work Autonomy to complete coffee orders and learn independently how to do every part of the job. Instead of relying on a support person, Isaiah can now answer his own questions using the Work Autonomy app. This is sustainable independence. Joseph. At Diamond High School, Joseph has been working with his teacher, Ben, on making pancakes for Breakfast Friday. Until now, he has been relying on consistent coaching and cues. Ben knew he was capable of completing pancakes on his own. Staff worked together to support Joseph to capture a picture and video reference sequence using the Work Autonomy app. Now Joseph is gaining independence and living up to his abilities. At Diamond, Joseph and Apple are now working independently using work autonomy with fluency.
Work autonomy is such a miracle in a way that when Joseph and Apple started using that, I felt like there is a huge weight taken off my shoulder, and I am just watching them, doing the process. And it's not me really doing the queuing now, but they independently go back to that work autonomy and see if they're doing the steps right, which in fact is something that they programmed themselves and that I did not program for them. So it's very powerful.
Student feedback.
Because this will guide me, like you can solve it, like making like my own steps by using your iPad.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. There's more, but certainly I've overused my time, and we have more film on our website. But there is a film of, and we're going to actually post it in the new year, of people connecting the dots between production and earnings using the app and being able to earn and the impact of that. And there's some great employer feedback as well in the films that talks about how these tools are allowing somebody to connect with their own employee and have more success in hiring people with disabilities. Thanks, Allie, for the reminder.
Sure, absolutely. So we do have a few questions that came in. Vincent was asking where they can access the documents pertaining to the cooking and such. You shared some images for that.
The documents, yeah, absolutely. So by January, those things are actually going to all be on our website. We've got a free tab, and actually because I just referenced them, I'm going to put them in there this weekend. So by Monday we'll have the toolkit.
Oh, perfect.
We also have some training on visual content, working in this weird visual world, implementing these tools. So I'll put those trainings up there as well. I give those to free for we give them away for free to everybody, just trying to make this crazy turn into this world where we're teaching people with and supporting people with significant disabilities over Zoom.
Perfect. Okay, and someone just asked about the website. I just put your website in the chat box. You should be able to access that there. And Anna Cruz was asking about providing guidance to creating and setting up student IEP goals during transition stage. I think that's referencing just kind of planning for transition and how to incorporate some of these skills into the IEP.
Yeah, it's such a good question. Thank you so much. And in fact, in that project that you're just watching film from, that's a school in Alaska, we're actually building a bank of goals associated with the tools, because in our world as teachers, right, we're worried about, you can't write a specific device down, etc. You want to work on the actual skill set and not name anything. And we want to name the other people in the room, that the person's actually getting it in the same way every time, that they're being offered the same accommodations, and that the environment is set up for their success. And so we're writing them now like you have, we're putting them in like you do behavior plans. Here's the plan that's cited as person-driven tools, and then there's a plan that's attached to the transition plan that outlines how it's being used.
Great, thank you. Are there any additional questions? And we have a little bit more time. You can either put those in the chat box or the Q&A. Kathy says, can you give my sister's group home, or can you go to my sister's group home to help the staff set this up? They're so confused. Just to help my sister call me over Messenger on her iPad. Seriously, do you give trainings?
I feel, first of all, I just, hand on heart, I feel you. This is really frustrating. And these times are really giving us a hardcore look at how inaccessible technology has been as an accommodation tool to individuals. I do train them. I'm very full right now, so I doubt that I'd be able to go anywhere, but certainly feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to brainstorm ways to implement and set goals and work with the team on the how to do this. So please feel free to reach out.
Great, thank you. Jenny just asked for your email in the chat box, and then we had, Oh, there's been a couple requests to put the apps back up on the screen. Can you just pull that slide back up? We have that included on the resource page as well, but just so you can take a quick snapshot of that if you'd like to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can also just leave up after that my last page, which is gives you information, the contact information too, if that's helpful. Okay, so there are lots of apps and we use lots of apps. We use more than this. These are newer things that a lot of people don't have on the list that they already have access to. Glide, I'm going to give you a quick summary of them if you want.
Yeah.
You think? Yeah. Okay. Glide and Marco Polo are apps used a lot by the deaf community. You record video messages instead of leaving a phone message. I can sign a message. It's also great for all the folks that are non-linguistic because I can leave them video messages. So that's brilliant. Cognitopia is a newer app that allows you to use video and pictures. The tracking is written, unfortunately, but there are good parts to it that we're really liking using. Can Plan as well. It's a visual task creator. It doesn't have a production chart. So for us, it's not doing everything we want it to, but it certainly has parts of it that are really helpful. If you're not already using QR codes and scanning apps, it's a way you can create a scan and then you can use a device of any kind to scan it. And there's a list in here about the kinds of ways you can do that. And you can link that to a video. So for example, I made a QR code specific to the Work Autonomy app. And if you not your camera over screen won't do it, but if you printed this out and put your scanning app over it, it would take you to our webpage where the film of the Work Autonomy app is. So you can connect the dots. Some people are using that like, here's a workplace. Here are the 5 places where I've posted a little QR code. You're going to use your phone to scan it. It's going to take you to the video reminder of what you're doing here or the video that you helped make. Seeing AI, if you don't know this app, get it. It is a visual scanner with readout for environments and documents. It's made for blind individuals, but it's being used by everybody in lots of ways because I can use it to scan a document. It'll read to me, signage out in the world, but also the environment. Here's a table with 4 people sitting around it. So definitely play around with that one. Otter is a newer note-taking recorder, which is far and above the best one that I've used. It's great to have microphones on everything now, but while I'm talking to Siri or on my, for any time I hit the microphone, when I pause, the microphone turns off. Otter is a note-taking recorder, so it will record, and not only will it keep recording when I stop talking or pause, but if Allie and I are having a conversation, it's going to note person 1 and person 2. It's going to recognize there are differences in our voice. So now I'm recording the whole interaction, and it captures an audio and text version for me. So it's a great app. I'm loving that. And then Genius Scan, if you don't already, again, this is a good person-driven tool because if somebody's going to an appointment, say they're going to a medical appointment, we teach people to scan their documents so that they can get more support around understanding what's in them.
Great, thank you. We had kind of a follow-up question about the IEPs and specifically to the Work Autonomy app. It looks like that's an app with a cost, and when implementing in the use of schools, is the school purchasing it or are VR agencies requesting it?
Yeah, we up on the right now on that free tab, we created it because we started talking about justifications for iPads because that also can be an issue for somebody to buy. So that's up there now. For Work Autonomy, school districts are buying it. This project in Alaska is filled with them now. It is pricey because it's a workhorse. And we are working on that. We're trying to figure out how to build a version that crosses all platforms that's really inexpensive so a person can buy it themselves, a teacher can buy it. We're working on that. We're not there yet. But VR buys it. Medicaid is in different states has access to, like here in Washington, if something's not on the list, people get access if they're on a waiver for $500 to pick what something that they want to use. The other thing is we do still, of course, write letters to the Rotary Club and everybody else to say, this is what we need this tool for and get donations to do it. Sorry about the pricey. I get the price tag is an issue. It's a conflict because in the rehab world, it's cheap. When we made it, our AT specialist from VR brought us to the big tech conference and said, this is the price that we love. But then in the app world, it's terrible. The app world, people expect things to be free. So there's a conflict of culture there.
Great. Well, thank you. We're getting lots of positive feedback in the chat box. I just wanted to thank you again, Jennifer. This was fabulous. I want to remind everyone we have our next session, part 2 of this series, happening next Thursday, same place, same time. Emily Tanis from the Coleman Institute is going to be sharing with us about transformation through disruption. She'll be focusing on technology solutions and the role in systems change with employment outcome. And please connect with the Yes Center, and we'll have all of the information and resources that Jennifer shared up on our website. We have been streaming this live on Facebook, so you could catch it live there or catch the replay on there, but then also we'll upload this to our YouTube channel.
And if there's something that I mentioned that isn't in the resources, please reach out to Ali. She can reach out to me and I can get it. We can get it added. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. We sure appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you, Ali and Serena, for creating this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen, as well.